I think when it comes to consumers, I sit back and I wonder like, what's next, right? Like, it seems like, because most of the things I said besides gaming, most of it is just like almost like a Ponzi scheme where you just hope somebody buys in after you and the value of what you did goes up. NFTs were just altcoins with images. It wasn't anything innovative. Like I'm not a big NFT guy. I think there's a couple use cases for it, but like its use cases, I feel like they're pretty fortified. Like I don't really need NFTs. They're not really gonna make my life better. Personal opinion right there. But when it comes to businesses, I feel like that's what's forward looking because in that space, the value hasn't been tapped. Maybe people find it unappealing because there's so many consumers in the world, and how am I going to use this business as operation? Like how am I going to make money? Maybe that's what consumers are saying, and that's not what most of these business things are about. It's about making a business more efficient. But I really do think that's the future, and that's where things are going. We're like consumers, if they're not tapped out yet, they almost got to be tapped out. I don't know what I know there's some developer somewhere on some blockchain network thinking up like the next thing that it's going to have a funny name that people are going to hop in on. But like it can't last much longer because as I said before, these just aren't sustainable businesses. To last in the future, you need sustainable businesses. For sustainable businesses, you need to leverage the features of the blockchain. You need to be able to operate at scale. You need to be solving a legitimate problem in a legitimate industry. There's very few places that you could do that, and BSV is one of those places. And I think now it's just a matter of time, like, okay, it's time for that to be implemented in industries, in businesses. And I think that's where the future lies. And what that means is either that the company who creates the solution is going to be acquired, maybe they sell the solution to some industry, something along the lines of that. Maybe they just keep operating it themselves if they have a number of clients and customers. But the world has to go that direction, and it hasn't gone that direction yet.
Bitcoin mining, Bitcoin wallet, blockchain, stablecoins, MetaNet, the evolution of money. Everybody is talking about Bitcoin today, but what exactly is it? Learn the basics from experts. Learn what Bitcoin is, how it works, and why it matters. Bitcoin 101, your ultimate guide to the fundamentals of blockchain.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Today we have Patrick Thompson joining us. Hey, Pat. We got to meet finally in Miami in April, and I was curious how you've been doing since then.
Yeah, well, first it's good to see you again. April was an interesting time, right? When we were at BTC 2022, and that was like my first time kind of getting like a look at what a lot of people who are looking at like the popular sort of narratives and stuff in crypto, like what they're up to, what they've been working on, what they think is like a profitable business or not. But I mean, wow, since then, so much has happened, right? I mean, in terms of BSV ecosystem in itself. I mean, at the time you met me too, I was doing a ton of work with CoinGeek as the associate editor for North America. Since then, I work full time with the Block Dojo now. So, our headquarters are over in London. We're opening the Miami office January 7th. That's the start date for cohort 1. So like a lot of my time and energy has been going into that. So since we first met each other, there's been some career changes. Of course, there's been like some trend narrative changes that take place in blockchain and crypto. And it's fast paced, so there's always something happening.
Kind of wanted to bring it back to the convention and everything real quick. I know that when we were there, it was just seeing everybody at the BTC convention, then getting to meet up with like you and Kurt and Alex and everybody. It's such a stark contrast in ideologies and fundamental thinking core values of what Bitcoin should be. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is why we are putting such an emphasis on Craig Wright. Like everybody outside of the BSV community puts such a heavy emphasis on Craig Wright. And it's like, oh, if you're in BSV, you're a cult member, you're a follower of Craig Wright. And I'm curious, how do we get people to start thinking about BSV in terms of the capabilities and kind of pushing Craig Wright to the side? Now, he's an important aspect of it, but he's not the whole of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so huge question. So like let's see where I'm sure there's going to be many parts to my answer. So I think it's important for me to start off like my journey to BSV wasn't BTC, BCH, BSV, which is what a
Interesting.
lot of people did. And I guess the word they use is like big blocker. They've always been a big blocker where like they liked Bitcoin, realized it had limitations in terms of block size. BCH came afterward, bigger block size, still the Bitcoin protocol. So like those core principles, which are very valuable, and then realized that had limitations. Then they went to BSV, which is unbounded block size. Still Bitcoin, like I said, those core principles are so important. But what becomes technologically possible because you can fit as much data into a block as a miner is willing to mine becomes like abundant. A lot of people took that journey. My journey was more like pretty general. I love the word crypto. A lot of people don't like the word crypto. Pretty general crypto guy who, there came a point in time when like I was sending BTC from one wallet, and I believe it's probably to an exchange wallet. I was in college at the time. So like when the little bit of BTC that I had went up in value, I was like, this is awesome. Like I have a little bit of money now. And I think I was going to sell it. But the fees were like so exorbitant that it dug into the amount I would have made so much. I think the fee at the time was like either like $130 or like $123, something like that. And I think I just went on Twitter and I posted like, wow, this is crazy. Like I'm really just trying to send money from one of my wallets to another one of my wallets. And it's taken so much of what would be my profit.
Right.
And somebody just like found the tweet and they're like, hey man, what you want to do is look at BSV. So that's kind of like how I made my way into BSV and began learning more. But like to bring it back a little bit though, like my approach to all things blockchain, Bitcoin, BSV is more like general crypto kind of thing. I think from about it from that mindset. So for that reason, I think I have like a tiny bit of a different point of view. You mentioned Craig before, and I think quite a few people went from BTC to BCH to BSV because they really admired some of the people who were very much in the spotlight when it comes to these protocols. Now, all blockchain protocols have this. It's not like a specific BSV thing. If you're thinking of Solana, they have Sam Bankman-Fried, Sam Bankman-Fried, however you want to say it. BCH, a lot of people think like Roger Ver. There's quite a few Avalanche guys. They have the little emoji next to their Twitter thing. Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin. So it's not uncommon for there to be people who are very much like at the forefront of blockchain protocols or who really support the development going on.
Makes
However,
sense.
I feel like in some cases, it's really limiting to the group of people who might be there because they followed this person they really admire more than like they kind of looked around to see like what the possibilities are or like in my case, like I actually ran into a problem or an obstacle or like, hey, this is expensive. Like, how can I make this cheaper? And that's what kind of made me to make that transition or spend my time and attention with BSV. So I think overall, what could change, I think now I'm bringing it back to the core question that you asked. I think what can change the mindset where, maybe people who do look at Craig or think Craig when they think BSV or, maybe a couple other people when they think BSV, what would probably change that? And in my opinion, the people who see the most success is like when you're approaching whatever you're trying to do, you're not approaching it from, hey, blockchain is cool, digital assets are cool, I'm going to build something, but more like, wow, like I work in this industry or I'm adjacent to this industry and I hit this problem. And you know what? The solution to this problem lies in this blockchain protocol somewhere. Not because like I'm doing all these add-ons that have bells and whistles, but like the inherent features of the chain. For me, it was low transaction fees at that point in time. Like it just solved the problem that I had. I think if more people were more, this problem exists, the solution lies within this thing, I'm not forcing it. I think there'd be much more success in getting some of these main characters, figures out of their head across all blockchains. This isn't BSV specific, but when BSV it comes to Craig with Ethereum, Vitalik, if they really thought about the problems they were trying to solve rather than, hey, this blockchain network is cool, I think there'd be so much less of that. And there'd be like, you use the word cultish, blockchain stuff wouldn't be as religious. It wouldn't be as cultish. So I would really like to see the world move in that direction.
So just get rid of all of the emphasis on all of the core front figures in all blockchains. And I guess that kind of brings us into my next question, which would be, should we be looking at this space or like blockchain technology in the sense of what we can do for blockchain to make it to make it advance, or what God, what's the saying? Don't ask what you can do for us, but what you know what I'm saying?
Yes, some president said that. That's right.
Yeah. So I'm thinking like, is there a fundamental way that we should be thinking about advancing blockchain technology over the way that we're looking at it right now, in the sense that, you know, I like blockchain, so I need to use blockchain and figure out a way that we can utilize this technology, or let me think of a way that I can build on blockchain because it's solving a core problem for something in the world.
I think it goes both ways, to be honest. I don't think there's like one right answer. I think there's many ways you can get to some like a solution that's like progressive or positive. What's going through my head, and I think like a pretty safe approach, a pretty like less risky approach to trying to solve that, is like really just thinking about what a blockchain does. So, you know, you have the immutable ledger. In a lot of cases, it's public, it's time stamped, it's transparent. And then like if you're working from those premises, you kind of say like, okay, these are the industries that already do this. Maybe you're coming from an industry where right away you know it's a problem. But if not, and you're just working on like what features does the blockchain actually have, then I would like to say it's automatically almost a good fit. You know, it could make things more efficient in that regard. If you're already keeping a ledger in your industry, you know, what comes up all the time is supply chain and logistics. Like it probably wouldn't hurt if the ledger was just a blockchain ledger, because it's inherently doing, you know, what they're already doing in those systems. I will say, I think like the caveat or what gets difficult when trying to put blockchain into those spaces, and something I personally don't like, is like, okay, it can be a solution to those problems that exist, but like, why do I need a coin or token? You know, because like it's like you had such a good idea, but now I'm telling somebody, hey, before this good idea really makes your business more efficient, I want you to boot up this exchange, change your US dollar for this certain coin or token, and then you can log onto your program and start using the app or service. I don't like that. I think it's high friction. I think it kind of defeats the purpose of like trying to achieve more efficiency because you're adding in the friction. But on a positive note, I have seen companies start to make that change where, because the transaction fees are so low when it comes to BSV, that the company just eats the cost for their client or customer. So the client or customer has no idea that, like, you know, what's really going on with the business that they're shopping with is using BSV in the background to pay for this, that, the other. But since the transaction fees on BSV are so low, the company can just eat it and it's not significant, you know? So, you know, at the end of the day, maybe the company's paying somewhere between, I don't know, even if it is like a 4-digit number, like a high 4-digit number or something, or even like a low, medium 5-digit number, it's not very consequential in terms of like what the client or customer pays them and the gain and efficiency that they receive in the end of the day.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of moves me. I have two questions now. Like, I'm excited. One of the questions that popped up in my head was, okay, so if that's the case, and companies are starting to see what BSV is capable of because of the microtransactions, even if they're willing to eat those costs. How do you feel about other cryptocurrencies, other chains? I mean, is there really a need for it? Because when you start looking at all of Bitcoin's capabilities, I know a lot of people in this space are like, well, we don't really need anything else because Bitcoin is capable of it all. And so it's kind of got this narrative around it, a bad rep of other cryptocurrencies. And I'm curious as to your idea of how other cryptocurrencies could fit in an economy with Bitcoin.
So something I say is like multi-coin approach. It's not evil or anything. And I think even in the BSV ecosystem, we are seeing companies that have solely only offered BSV support start offering support for other digital assets as well, whether that be as a payment method or just something that they can use in app. So I think it's not evil for a couple reasons. I guess like starting from, I don't know, I'll just go through whatever all my reasons are, right? So like,
Sure.
a good conversation I had and what somebody told me, and I tend to agree with, is like a blockchain network is almost like an accountant, right? Like every tax season, most people use an accountant, but like so many accountants exist, right? And at the end of the day, they're doing the same job. But what could attract you to go one direction opposed to another direction is like maybe the perks that they offer. Maybe one account really is cheaper than the other one. Maybe you like how another one has like sparkling water in the lobby, like there, just like the tiny sort of unique sort of perks that you get from shopping with one opposed to the other. But at the end of the day, you're getting your taxes done. And I completely agree with that. And I also have a friend who's like, Pat, you can make the best argument, about Bitcoin, BSV, or tell people all about blockchain, and they can really understand it and agree with you. And then they're going to go out and buy Dogecoin. So another thing that I think like falls into this category, and it's kind of similar with like stocks as well. It's not really about like individual stocks. It's more about like industries and sectors. So, if I tell people about BSV and they think it's awesome and they think it's great, maybe they don't walk away thinking like this is the one I should be spending all my time and attention on. Maybe they just walk away and think like blockchain good, just like a very simple thought. Blockchain good. What can I get my hands on that's cheaper than BSV? Which I think is like why, this year you saw a lot of people go for Dogecoin, which is like less than a penny at a point in time. Or years ago, it was Ripple, which was like, 15, 20, 10 cents at a point in time, where it wasn't like, I do think there's objectively, technologically more advanced chains, but people are really simple. And the truth is a lot of people are speculating at the moment. So it's not as advanced as like, okay, I should go this way for this reason. I think it's a lot more nuanced than that. And then I just want to bring it back to like the companies as well. I think why the companies are doing like multi-coin support is because there's no harm and there's actually a lot of benefits that come from they're opening their world up. All right. There's X amount of people who, let's say, hold BSV. And then there's this even larger group that holds maybe Solana, that holds maybe Ethereum. So by like kind of opening those floodgates and not saying like, hey, I've made a product for literally X amount of people, like at the end of the day, like you can put numbers on how many people are in each blockchain crypto ecosystem. They kind of just open it up to everybody. Hey, I made a product for all blockchain crypto users, digital asset holders. So for a company, there's so much benefit in that where, like, okay, maybe the average BSV user is going to shop with me, I don't know, once a week and spend $5. But if you open up to this entire blockchain crypto market, you can multiply the amount of customers, even if they're spending the same amount of money. It's just, I think it's a net positive for businesses. A lot of people push back on it and they're like, there's only one internet. But I think that's the complete wrong analogy. I think it's more like I said, like accountants, or before the accountant analogy I heard, I think it's more like cars, right? We're like, okay, we decided cars are good, but like you can have a Honda, you can have a Ford, at the end of the day, it accomplishes the same thing. They have different features, but like, it's not like cars good. We can only shop with one car maker. Like that's just not how the world works. And I don't think we're really on our way to it working like that anytime soon. So I see multi-coin being a thing for like quite a bit of time. And I personally don't have a problem with it. I know others would probably say otherwise.
Two things come to mind in that sense. And one of those things is, I had a conversation with Jerry Tan a while back ago. Jerry's a cool guy. And he made a comment to me. He was like, well, how many decentralized XYZs do we need? How many of these exchanges or banks or whatever do we actually need across the world? And that's kind of where I've fallen. I'm like, yeah, if BSV is capable of all these other things, are all of these other things very necessarily, are they necessary? But on the flip side of that, I can also see it from the other side and say, well, going back to the fact that we have so many like Craig Wright following individuals in the BSV community, if we did open up the floodgates and allow for companies to, say, accept Solana or Doge or whatever, I feel like it would bring in kind of a different mindset from individuals outside of the BSV community that would almost bring in like a breath of fresh air, new ideas, new kind of everything. And so I'm curious, go ahead.
No, that definitely brings me to like a point that I wanted to make too, right? Because when you have, well, I guess just like in other terms, the BSV ecosystem is extremely engineer heavy. Like the conversations with these guys, like, they're very focused on the product and like the specs of the product, and they love to tinker with whatever they're making. But I think when you look at more of other blockchain digital asset ecosystems, I mean, like, one word people use, like, they're degenerate gamblers, but like, I'm going to change that. I'm not going to say they're degenerate gamblers, but like, it's more of just like the man off the street, the woman off the street, where like they're kind of just like okay, this is good for me. And like I said, most of it is speculation at the moment. This is good for me because it's making me money. This is good for me because I enjoy playing this game. Like something along the lines of that. And I feel like when that's the case, people take a completely different approach, which brings me to like another thing I wanted to say, right? Like BSV eventually got NFTs and like we're kind of moving into the GameFi space now. But like, something like Ethereum literally had this 2016 with CryptoKitties. Like, granted, CryptoKitties didn't work, but like so many people followed suit afterwards. And then like they got NFTs off the ground 2019, 2020. It took us in BSV to like 2021, 2022 to get NFTs.
Lagging
Like,
behind.
why did we wait so long to decide it was a good thing? Like, we're so technical and the law says this, you got to do this, which you got to have respect for the law. But at the same time, like, you got to realize where consumer demand is. Like, I get it. We're engineer heavy. There's a quote that I like from a guy named Jim Clark, who's like, engineers tend to make products that only engineers tend to make products that only other very intelligent engineers like to use. Sometimes like, I think these guys just miss the mark. But if you are thinking from that perspective, like, wow, people want to, they want to buy JPEGs that they might be able to sell for more later. Wow, people want to play CryptoKitties because they think it's cool that they can play a game and maybe make money at the same time. And I keep bringing it back to speculation because most of it is speculation driven at the moment. But you shouldn't look the other way. Like what consumers want. I think like any good business is gonna, especially when the goal is to generate profit, you have a bottom line. Especially if your investors are kind of breathing down your neck, like, hey, what's your revenue stream? What's your money maker? Like, you shouldn't ignore where the demand is. And I think like BSV has done a bad job of that. It's taken us years to kind of be like, you know what? Token swap, maybe it's not a terrible thing. You know what? NFTs, maybe not a terrible thing. Like, if we just did that in 2019, we could probably be the dominant chain for NFTs because our transaction fees are so much lower and people are so interested in making a profit that if you do go to sell it, it's not like the transaction fee is going to cut into whatever you're going to make. We could have been the dominant chain for NFTs. We just waited so long. We waited too long.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. It's like you said, there's so many BSV coming into the BSV ecosystem from somebody who didn't precisely follow the BTC, BCH, BSV thing myself. It was very difficult to come into the space and then have to try to take in all of that information because the caliber at which the BSV ecosystem people think and do things is just on a whole other level. And that can, like you said, be a good and bad thing because they're going to target those things to the same type of individuals. But if we had a fresh way of thinking by bringing in individuals from outside of the community who were able to breathe in that fresh new ideas, I really think we could be pushing this further because you look at all the other chains and they have like a third or a fraction of the capabilities that Bitcoin has, but yet in this sense they're a little further ahead of us because they're able to allow those ideas to propagate or whatever the word is, you know what I'm saying? So I totally agree with you that some ways that we think need to be tweaked and changed a little bit.
I'll add one more thing to that too. A good point that I heard recently is that like, okay, everybody knows Ethereum can't scale. Ethereum users don't care that Ethereum can't scale. They don't use Ethereum for its scale. So I think it would be helpful for more engineers, developers, observers in the BSV ecosystem to like understand that okay, people don't use BTC because they want big blocks. That's not why they're using BSV. That's not why that's not why they're using BTC. That's not why they're attracted to it. So I think when people can start to think through some of those concepts more about like why somebody's really on a chain, I think it would be overall helpful. But like, yeah, totally. I think we put a lot of focus on the technological elements of a protocol. But that's not always what's going to sway somebody or what's going to win somebody over in the end of the day. And that's probably not the primary thing that the average consumer is focusing on when they decide what kind of chain they want to get into.
No.
Okay, and this is the real last final comment I have about that. I think a lot more people are blockchain agnostic than you would probably think. On Twitter is such a space where people are so religious and and very loud about what they have their weight behind. But if you meet like somebody, I don't know, just at your local at an event local in town to you, or even the events, which I actually prefer, that's not like a blockchain crypto focused event, like you're really dealing with people who have businesses and are looking for business solutions. They don't care what chain they're using. The conversation that they're pretty much having with you is like, hey, I need this kind of solution. Can you build this kind of solution? It's not about like, I need this kind of solution only if it's built on Ethereum. Otherwise, no, nobody's saying that. That's not what they're interested in. Like, they just need something that works for them, that makes them more efficient.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Patrick. That's a very good point. And it actually brings me up I was listening I know that you went to the Unbounded Capital Summit recently, and I was curious what the general vibe was there, how it went. I heard from I believe I was watching gosh, what's his name? He lives here in Atlanta with me. I meet
Joshua Hensley.
There we go. I was listening to Joshua Hensley yesterday talk about it. He said that he also went, and that the general vibe there was just great, and that businesses are really starting to pay attention now. So I'm curious as to what your perspective was on the event.
Yeah, and I think it ties back a little bit into what I was previously saying, right? Because these are very serious. Well, first I'll start with the audience, like paint the picture. In the audience, it was a lot of investors, and by that I mean angel investors, a ton of family offices, venture capital companies. It was mostly like primarily an investor audience, but at the same time, you did have people who were at the beginning of their business journeys. Of course, when people hear investors are going to be in the room, if they have a business themselves, they might try to get into the room to sort of pitch to investors or see if somebody will give them some funding. So that was primarily the audience. I will say Zach, Dave, and Jack, they put on an absolutely excellent conference. And the reason I say that is because I like going to events, and this is anywhere in the world, where it's not what I call like the usual suspects, right? It's not the people that I'd expect to see from place to place. It's a lot of new faces. I have to have new conversations. I have to meet new people, and they nailed it with that. The audience was so good in that regard. So in terms of the way they received the message or understood it, I think they completely got it. And my big signal for that was during the Q&A session. Some of the questions that these folks in the audience were asking were like, they were clearly locked in. They were clearly very interested on like the value prop, the value add that either the individual on stage, the business on stage was talking about. So they totally got it. And once again, I just think it's another one of those things where like that group of audience, they're just looking for, investor wise, they're looking for something that makes sense and something that makes money. Individual wise, right? There are some people who did come out to just learn. Like, they're looking for something that's efficient, that could solve a problem in the world. So it totally, I mean, like, not once within the event within the summit that they held did like some like strange, maybe like Craig Wright reputational stuff come up. I think there was only one session where a group on stage like willingly decided to talk about that, which I completely understand too, because somewhere down the road, somebody's probably going to have like some questions like that for you. But like overall, it was very well received, and like people get it. When things make sense, people get it. Like, you don't really have to, sell somebody on something that makes sense. If it makes sense and people think it can make their life better, like, they're in. You don't really need to pitch them or tell them this, that, the other. So I thought it was really well. I thought they put together a great conference, and I hope to see more stuff like that in the future, where maybe it is an event that's not held by maybe like a company that you would expect to hold an event or a big conference, but a type of thing where like, hey, these guys on Bounded Capital, they're investors themselves. They got a ton of investors in a room with, people who really understand what's going on in BSV and technology and blockchain in general. And the outcome was just good conversations, a lot of good people in attendance. So I think that's like a recipe for success, and I hope to see more people do it.
Oh, that's really exciting, Pat, because I know one of the things that really upset me in Miami was not because the event itself wasn't great, because I enjoyed getting to see new people come in, especially at the Bitcade event, where we were having people come in off the street and learn about Bitcoin and what it was capable of. That was great. But there was one of the things that kind of upset me was this phrase that was kind of being spread around, like, oh, sometimes our events are kind of like echo chambers where the same people kind of attend and we all talk about the same things over and over again. And I was like, gosh, if that's the case, then are we really getting the message out? And so hearing about Unbounded Capital doing that, and then getting to see it firsthand that, hey, that's not always the case. Look at what happened at the Big Kate event. That's really exciting. That breathes in like a fresh new life into the space, so to speak. But I guess it kind of does tie back to like Craig Wright again. Now he's going through all of these trials right now, and there's one going on specifically with like Hodlnaut and Craig. And I'm curious, like, you see the other side is so against Craig, but it's like the narrative that it's like, oh, he must be a fraud, he must be a fake. But meanwhile, it's like, regardless of the outcome of any of these court cases, do you really think it's going to affect Bitcoin so much, or is it going to have a positive impact on the BSV space if Craig does continue winning these court cases? I guess is what I'm saying.
No, that's a really good question because that's not something I give much thought, time, or energy. But I do think I guess I have like a couple ways to answer that. So one, court case wise, there's a lot of times when I have no idea what's going on with the court cases. Like the Hodlnaut case over in Norway, like I don't really know what's at the center of the court case or anything like that. So those things, like, if I don't know about it, I don't talk about it. But I'll say this, like, I think overall, so when something can hold up in court, which Craig has been doing a pretty good job of with these cases that have gone through
Absolutely.
court, it does make something stronger and more resilient. So I think there's positive value in that. If somebody takes you to court and you win the case, like that kind of strengthens whatever argument you were trying to make. So I'll acknowledge it in that regard. But also I think this whole thing kind of ties back to like, some of the stuff being going through court, or maybe like my perspective of what the purpose is to like, can the court come to the conclusion that Craig Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto? And to that, I'd say that I don't think it matters, right? I think maybe like somewhere between 2015 and 2018, things like that mattered more and would have more of a significant impact. But I think at this point in time, I don't think the world is going to care who Satoshi Nakamoto is or the work somebody's done on Bitcoin since day zero. I just don't think those are relevant factors anymore. And one example I like to give is like during this, I guess 2020, 2022, like sort of like DeFi, NFT, GameFi craze that took place. People didn't know who Vitalik Buterin was, and they were buying Ethereum NFTs. They're like, who's that? Like it doesn't really matter. It's one of those things where like we're at a point in time when people aren't coming to protocols for maybe some names that support the protocol, some big names that support the protocol, that build on the protocol. That's not really the case anymore. I could see that changing in the future if, like, I don't know, some superstar investor appears, maybe like a Warren Buffett decides that he calls Bitcoin rat poison, but maybe he appears and says this protocol is good. People would rally behind that. But like, I think where we are right now, like it totally doesn't matter, who some of the people who support blockchain networks are. It's just not relevant. People don't care. So I think the window for that is kind of gone. I think that was like pretty early days of what it mattered. And I think a reason for that is there were so many fewer coins. It's not like this thing where you're sorting through like 10,000 different things that exist, and you're kind of just looking, maybe an investor's looking for something with like a low market cap and a lot of interest, so that when somebody buys it, the price spikes. And it's not like that anymore. There's so many options where it's not like the definitive factor is no longer like, hey, this person supports this person supports that. So I think those are my kind of like opinions on that question there.
I like your take on it, and it makes me think about like just the different narratives that are associated with, say, like BTC or Ethereum, and how we were talking about earlier, how people that are investing in those coins are either they're not investing in it because they care whether or not it's capable of doing what it actually says that it can do. They're investing in it because they have this bias towards it, where I'm gonna invest and I'm gonna make money. And I feel like, in a sense, that in the BSV community, we've kind of lost that momentum or push to get the price up, or pump our bags, so to speak, whereas in every other community there's this huge drive, this huge push for adoption to get the price up so that people can make money. And I feel like that's one of the driving factors that helps push these innovative ideas in those other communities. It's something that we're lacking in the BSV space. And so I'm curious, like, should we be thinking more about price in BSV, or should we be ignoring all of the narratives as we have been doing?
So I love price, right? Like, and I think that comes from me being like a more general sort of like blockchain crypto guy before I started spending a lot of time and energy with BSV, which began probably like late 2019. That sounds about right. Like late 2019, maybe early 2020 is when like I really took a deep dive into BSV and started writing articles and started spending time talking to companies and really got a better understanding. And I think I'll start like this. I think technologically, like if you're building something, well, one, really intelligent people get it. So I feel like that should be a good sign too. Like, sure, I have criticisms about things being engineer heavy, but literally some of the smartest people I know, like when they learn what BSV is and what BSV can do, like they get it and they say it's the right option. So like it should totally not be overlooked that there's so much value in that. Like, why are all these smart guys spending their time and attention here? And a short answer, of course, there's probably many more answers, is because any legitimate business scales, and you need to have that ability to have that transaction throughput to put as much to send as much data as possible from point A to point B. You need to have the ability to do that all at once. That was how I would start my question, but I kind of forget your question. So can you just like rehash me on what your original question was?
Yeah, we were talking about like the narratives in other communities.
Okay,
And
I got
yeah,
it. Sorry, I got the thread again. We were talking about price and such.
yeah.
So in a previous interview that took place, John Pitts, CEO, co-founder of Slictionary, something he said, I think it was actually a blog post of his, is that like, all right, let's be real. Everybody needs a little bit of wind in their sails. And for some of these protocols, the wind in their sails is people literally sit around and say this coin is going to $10,000 and it's at $100 today. That might make anybody who has a spare $100 be like, all I need to do is own one, and I've made $9,900. Overall, I think price is not a bad thing. I think more dialogue about economics in general, about price in general, would be helpful for BSV. I understand the angle, like, hey, we are the very professional, very enterprise facing, we could provide enterprise solutions sort of protocol. I totally get it. But at the same time, we can't ignore that I think a majority of blockchain digital asset users at this point in time are consumers. And consumers approach this thing with like a totally different mindset than enterprises and businesses do. So although I do think in the long term and for a business to be sustainable, it needs to have those sort of elements we talked about with the inherent features of blockchain that improve the efficiency of the business, and it can do it at scale. But we can't ignore that, like, where we are today, like, come on, the most popular thing that happened in the last year was people buying JPEGs, like that's not, businesses weren't doing that. It was people at home. It was consumers. So because it's so consumer driven and consumers do play such a significant role in what takes place, I think conversations about price, economics, even if people were doing a little bit of like price prediction, I think it would be healthy. I think it'd be helpful. I think it would be one of those things that put a little bit of wind in the sails where, I hate technical analysis. I feel like people are just drawing these BS lines on charts. But if you had a guy doing that, it has such a big following, things like that are helpful. When people are analyzing either the fundamentals or the qualitative aspects of something and, publishing it and putting it online. Honestly, this isn't a bad idea for anybody who's listening. If I don't do it first, maybe you want to do it, but like kind of taking this like analytic look at like what's taking place in the ecosystem and what it could mean for the future, whether that be good or bad. I say good or bad because not everything's just straight good. If things are a roller coaster, you're going to have ups and downs in this analysis, but I think that'd be helpful. It would give people a better understanding that like, okay, there's this very large group of people here who is interested in making money. Investors are interested in making money, even if they're backing businesses. Like this will be like some color commentary for them. This is kind of going to fill in the picture of some of the underlying things that are going on that may either influence their decision or, make them back out of a decision.
So correct me if I'm wrong. The way that I'm hearing you kind of state this is there's two. We're either appealing in the BSV community, we're appealing more towards businesses and solutions, whereas in other communities they're appealing more towards the consumer. because they're the ones that are pumping the price. And so in the BSV community, it's great that we're appealing to businesses because ultimately that's going to bring in money as well. But in the immediate term, in order to affect the price, we need to be appealing more to the consumer demands of whatever it is that they're wanting.
It's like something investors say, right? A good investor can see around the corner, right? It's not like what's taking place today because like the money has already been made and what's taking place today, but like, hey, what's going to take place in 3 months that like nobody's really looking at? I can put some money down first. Everybody's going to follow in 3 months, and like I've just made a good investment. I feel like with BSV, we're totally seeing around the corner. Hey, 10 years down the road, like you can't have a project that just makes money on day one. Granted, you might make tens of millions on day one, and that keeps you alive for however many years. That's what a lot of blockchain protocols have done. That's why they've been substantial over periods of time. But like, that's not a business. That's not something that's self-sustaining. That's not something that's going to be around in 20 years. That's not something that, has a CEO, a COO, a CTO that, they could keep the business in their family or pass it down, or somebody can acquire it if they want. So a lot of crypto has projects and not businesses, but like totally to bring it back, like I think it's kind of seeing around corners. I think it's what's theoretically good versus what's good in reality right now. And I think it's just that tiny bit of separation where like, yes, in the future takes a while to build. Like it's going to be more business facing, business to business sort of applications, couple business to consumer applications. But like right now, like it's largely consumers. So by focusing on the future, I think a few BSV companies are missing out on like what's popular now.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me into my next thought here, which is like regulation in cryptocurrencies moving forward. I know recently they've been talking a lot about creating regulation around stablecoins specifically, and so forward thinking, like 10 years from now, about what type of impact those regulations are going to have on the overall space is pretty big, especially when they're targeting stable coins in particular, saying things like, stable coins would need to be backed 100% by like by the dollars or whatever, right? And it brings me to the thought of like Tether being predominantly backed right now by commercial papers instead of being backed by dollars. And so if regulation starts coming down the pike, and all of a sudden, say something like Tether that is helping to prop up BTC, all of a sudden goes down or has major issues, like what kind of ramifications that's going to have on the overall space. And do you get where I'm going?
No, that's another really great question because that's something people kind of explore. But I guess like my perspective is probably a bit different than the consensus people have. I guess I'll start like this. So recently I went to the Philadelphia Federal Reserve Bank. It was called FinTech Week, but they that's what they focused on. It was banking, finance. There were so many auditors and regulators in the audience, and a significant portion of their agenda, especially on day one, was like about the politically correct word is digital assets. It was about digital assets and distributed ledger technologies. A significant part of the day one agenda was about that. So I went. This was at the bank in person to check it out to see what was going on. And what's interesting is that like it's probably because me and you are probably in a couple of the same ecosystem spaces, especially on like Twitter and such. And they're really beating the drum for these technologies, but like the bankers, these legacy bankers, these central bankers, they think blockchain and digital assets are a joke. They do not think they're threatening at all. When it comes to stable coins, like they're like, okay, it's better than a volatile digital asset, but like, they're not crazy about them or anything. Central bank digital currency, they're like, we don't need this. So like, they're really not threatened by it. And so I started off like that because I think I heard something at that conference that was along the lines of like Tether and some of these other pretty much offshore companies where everybody is aware that they have, I guess like shady practices or practices that might not fly in the United States. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, in a very matter-of-fact way, these aren't businesses registered in the United States. Like they're registered in the Cayman Islands and the Bahamas and the Seychelles for like a very real reason. And that's because like businesses can operate differently over there. They can fly by night a little bit, like they can be a little bit off the radar. So even though I think so many people have these complaints about like what they're doing is clearly illegal, which I'm not going to argue with at all. I think what they do is, it's very, very, very interesting, very, not regular. It's when you dive into it, their practices, yeah. But they know what they're doing, right? They know what they're doing, and that's why they're working in places like Puerto Rico and the Cayman Islands. Like they completely know what's going on. I think it's going to be much. I guess like the focal point of my message there. I think it's much more difficult to pin down somebody like Binance and CZ and Tether than people make it seem. Everybody knows what they're doing is illegal. But like, how are you going to catch Binance if they literally don't have a headquarters? Like where do you press these charges to? So like, unless I think the big factor and what a lot of these, I think a lot of these companies may get caught by the SEC and they'll have to pay like a settlement fee. We've already seen that take place with a couple, but it's not really because like, hey, your whole business operations are a disaster and that would not fly in the United States, but more along the lines of like, hey, you know what? After review, we decided that Tether is an unregistered security and you service some customers in the US. And you can't do that because the U.S. is our territory. You have to register with our office. So that's my take in regard to Tether. And I guess my one last thing there is that another thing they were saying at this federal bank conference was that a lot of the laws that exist, they already apply to blockchain and digital asset companies. Like, it's not, and Gary Gensler says this all the time in like all the various different like opinion pieces he publishes for Wall Street Journal, or like there's quite a few times where like he's on like virtual seminars at the Washington Post, but kind of like, hey, like you think you're calling yourself a cryptocurrency lender and borrower, but what you are is, it's called this in traditional finance. You're calling yourself a DeFi platform, but you're really just this. We have a word for it. So they're trying to like change the nomenclature and make it seem like blockchain digital asset is like a beast of its own. But I do think that like, yeah, a lot of the existing laws and regulations, they capture the activities that these companies do. Like they should be regulated. They should be registered with the offices. They're not because they're shady and they're flying by night. But like that doesn't change that like these laws already exist. It's really just a matter of time until one, the SEC catches some of these actors that do operate in the United States that should be registered with offices, but they're not. Like BlockFi was a big one where they were lending and borrowing and they weren't registered. And for those who are located offshore, I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult than everybody thinks to like pin these offshore guys.
Those are some really valid points there that I hadn't even considered, because we think about laws being so concrete, especially like here in the US, you tend not to think about like other countries and their laws regarding specific things. So I think you brought up some really great points there. And if we already have the laws, but they're still doing these shady things, it begs the question. They're going to continue making more and more laws. They're going to continue trying to regulate it. And as they do that, what we've seen with like traditional stock markets and such is that the price tends to come down a little bit as more and more regulations come out and evolve, because it's like a equilibrium act, right? Where as it becomes more regulated, it becomes more safer, and thus the price stabilizes. Whereas the unique thing about cryptocurrencies in general is that because it's unregulated, it's largely unregulated, the price is very speculative, so thus it could be very volatile, which attracts more people in. And so if regulations come out that bring in that stability, where do you see the price on all of these markets going? Do you see it following that of traditional stock markets? And what specifically do you think is going to happen with, say, like the BSV price?
So I think with all industries in general, usually more regulation means that it's gonna like slow growth for the industry, which is a bad thing for price. And when you hear things like, hey, the regulation is going to be lightened up, or maybe if the industry runs on like licenses or permits, and hey, more licenses and permits are coming out, or like, maybe we're easing these regulations, it usually catalyzes growth, and that's good for the price. So I think to answer that question, the corner that like I'm trying to see around right now is there's so much going on in like the global economy with and there's an election taking place in November, so like election years are always like a bit difficult. But on top of that, inflation has been such a big issue in the United States. I mean, I'm not European and I haven't been to Europe in a little while, but like I hear they have like an energy crisis going on over there. And I mean, just like with the interest rate raises in the United States as well, overall, those things are pretty bad for risk assets. And me personally, I can't really see those conditions changing. Definitely till not till after November, right? After I believe it's the midterm election that's taking place. I can't see anything positive taking place till after November, December. Well, November in the United States, then like Europe, if they're really having an energy crisis, like you need the most energy in the winter to keep your house warm when things are cold and such. So until the new year, I'm not too optimistic about like most markets. I do think there's markets that are like resilient throughout that. I don't think blockchain, digital assets, distributed ledger technologies are one of those. So I think until if I had to like make a statement on it or something, until 2023, like I say like expect the number to go down. I think expect things to decline. I don't see there's not many positive catalysts for blockchain technologies at this point in time. And I guess this is an important place to say too. But that's where something like enterprise blockchain comes in handy because it doesn't matter what's going on globally. If you really created a business solution that's made a business more efficient, you're going to be a bit more resilient because somebody needs that solution. You're going to have clients, you're going to have customers. That could be a positive if you have that enterprise solution in there. But if we're just talking about like very general, like, I have a spare couple dollars. Where should I put my money? Like crypto, blockchain, whatever you want to call it, it's not looking really attractive right now because people just don't want to carry that risk when there's some people in the world who are having trouble heating their houses and putting food on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me think about, I know a while back ago, there was a lot of talk about how the European Union and states here in the United States, like New York, were talking about limiting or banning proof of work mining to lessen the energy consumption with such practices. And if Europe is undergoing like an energy crisis right now, wouldn't it make sense for them to want to target proof of work mining specifically to help address those issues?
Yeah, I think it would totally make sense for them to. I mean, like, I feel like proof of work mining is just like such an easy target where you can, where especially since so many people don't understand like blockchain, Bitcoin mining, proof of work, like they could just look and be like, hey, this thing apparently at first glance doesn't produce much in the world and it takes this much energy. And since nobody really understands it, everybody goes like, yeah, it totally does. We should get rid of it. so, so it's not it's an easy target when there's energy crises going on, but also what I know quite a bit about, that proof of work debate and the energy consumption. So if it is an enterprise blockchain application, it's not like you're just mining the blockchain to create more coins and hopefully have more money in the world. The transactions you're mining are literally a business's operations, a business's transactions. So it's creating real value in the world. I think it should definitely be looked at it from that perspective when people are analyzing these things. Not everybody has the best understanding of that, and people are doing more and more educational efforts. Brian Doherty at the Bitcoin Association does a great job of having conversations with politicians, governments around the world, letting them know like, hey, we are, moving a business's operations forward. We are putting their transactions on chain, and that's what's being mined. It's not like we're frivolously looking for more money. But a lot of people don't understand that. And there's so many politics that come in when it comes to energy. And that's what I'm not the expert on, like the sort of political side of things. And, I know there's ESG investors out there, things along the lines of that. I think that's where it gets dicey. But yeah, I mean, like globally, proof of work mining tends to be an easy target where not many people understand it. At first glance, it just looks like you're consuming energy to create not much in the world, maybe more money for yourself if you're lucky. But under the hood, it's so much more than that. That's where there's like a significant education gap.
I appreciate you bringing that point up because that was the point I was hoping you were going to make about it, because that's exactly how I view it. There's a lack of education. So definitely, I think those things are important to get the message out and let people know, like, hey, this isn't as scary as it's being made out to seem at the moment. But at the same time, Pat, I know that we're walking up here on the hour mark, and so I was hoping, is there anything that you think that maybe we may have missed, and if so, what is it, or is there any type of message that you have for the community as a whole?
I should have thought of both those things because like my answer to each is almost kind of like no. But let me think. If I had like a final message or like maybe, all right, I think I'd have like a sort of general takeaway or like a summary of like, kind of everything we just talked about. I think when it comes to what's going on in like the blockchain digital asset world, there is definitely a consumer side and there's a business side. the value in the consumer side, in my opinion, it's, well, not even in my opinion, objectively, it's been tapped into. People did ICOs, people did, yeah, initial DEX offerings, people did NFTs, people tried DAOs and experimented with DAOs. Like, all that stuff is out in the open, all that stuff already happened. For the consumer side, people are working on games. I think games do have some staying power, but like, I see people creating great games, but I don't think we've had really that killer game just yet. Hopefully ViaNext changes that. ViaNext created a really cool game where they, it's kind of like a first-person shooter Call of Duty thing, but for every kill, or the politically correct word is takedown that you get, you get a micropayment in your wallet. But that I'm getting away from the message. I think when it comes to consumers, I sit back and I wonder, like, what's next, right? Like, it seems like, because most of the things I said besides gaming, most of it is just like almost like a Ponzi scheme where you just hope somebody buys in after you and the value of what you did goes up. NFTs were just altcoins with images. It wasn't anything innovative. Like, I'm not a big NFT guy. I think there's a couple use cases for it, but like, its use cases, I feel like they're pretty fortified. Like, I don't really need NFTs. They're not really going to make my life better. Personal opinion right there. But when it comes to businesses, I feel like that's what's forward looking, because in that space, the value hasn't been tapped. Maybe people find it unappealing because, there's so many consumers in the world, and, how am I going to use this business's operation? Like, how am I going to make money? Maybe that's what consumers are saying, and that's not what most of these business things are about. It's about making a business more efficient. But I really do think that's the future, and that's where things are going. We're like, consumers, if they're not tapped out yet, they almost got to be tapped out. I don't know what, I know there's some developer somewhere on some blockchain network thinking of like the next thing that it's going to have a funny name that people are going to hop in on. But like, it can't last much longer, because as I said before, these just aren't sustainable businesses. To last in the future, you need sustainable businesses. For sustainable businesses, you need to leverage the features of the blockchain. You need to be able to operate at scale. You need to be solving a legitimate problem in a legitimate industry. There's very few places that you could do that, and BSV is one of those places. And I think now it's just a matter of time, like, okay, it's time for that to be implemented in industries, in businesses. And I think that's where the future lies. And what that means is either that the company who creates the solution is going to be acquired, maybe they sell the solution to some industry, something along the lines of that. Maybe they just keep operating it themselves if they have a number of clients and customers. But the world has to go that direction, and it hasn't gone that direction yet. So like, that's what I would keep my eye on. Like, I would really try to hone in on like, who is building these business facing or business applications sort of uses that involve blockchain. Because like I said, consumers, they got to be finished soon. Like, how many more scams can happen? How many more Ponzi's can happen? It's got to be over soon. So I think that's my message, my sort of general takeaway from all of it.
I love it, Pat. And I just want to say I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and having this lovely little chat with me. But with that being said, Pat, I do believe that's going to wrap it up. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and make sure that before you leave, you hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. I'm going to hit this.
Bitcoin mining, Bitcoin wallet, blockchain, stablecoins, Metanet, the evolution of money. Everybody is talking about Bitcoin today, but what exactly is it? Learn the basics from experts. Learn what Bitcoin is, how it works, and why it matters. Bitcoin 101, your ultimate guide to the fundamentals of blockchain.
Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. Share this video with a friend, and also follow us on Twitter at BritneyBits.